Hey guys, tonight we settle into a quiet room where the light feels softer than usual, where the air hums gently, and where your breathing slowly begins to match the calm rhythm of the night. You might be lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, or curled under a blanket that feels just warm enough to hold your thoughts. Outside, the world seems distant, almost hushed, like it's giving you permission to finally slow down. You probably think more at night than you admit. Thoughts that stay silent all day suddenly grow louder when everything else quiets down. Memories, worries, tiny regrets, and small hopes all line up like they've been waiting for this exact moment. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. If you feel like it, share where you're listening from and what time it is there. There's something comforting about knowing people all around the world are also awake, also unwinding, also quietly searching for peace. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You lie awake, feeling that familiar, gentle loneliness, not the sharp kind, but the soft, echoing kind that settles in when the day ends. It's the kind of loneliness that doesn't necessarily mean you're alone. It just means you're finally quiet enough to notice the empty spaces between your thoughts. Everyone carries at least one memory they never talk about. You probably have one too. A small moment tucked away in your mind, something that feels too personal, too tender, or too confusing to put into words. At night, those memories often drift closer, like they want to sit beside you in the dark. Maybe you remember a time you felt left out, a group conversation where your voice felt invisible, a message you never received back, or a call that never came. It doesn't have to be dramatic to hurt. Sometimes it's the smallest moments that linger the longest, like a quiet ripple that never fully fades. You might even smile a little at how your brain works. All day it behaves like a responsible adult, and then at night it turns into a dramatic storyteller who insists on replaying scenes from years ago. It's almost funny, like your mind waited until bedtime to say, "By the way, remember that awkward thing from 2013? That's one of those gentle, self-aware humor moments that reminds you you're human, not broken. People still wonder why some feelings never fade. Maybe it's because emotions aren't meant to disappear, they're meant to soften, transform, and eventually teach you something. Loneliness, especially, has a strange way of shaping you. It can make you more sensitive, more reflective, more appreciative of warmth when you finally feel it. You think about a night from your past. Perhaps you were sitting by a window watching streetlights glow, feeling both peaceful and painfully aware of how quiet your life felt at that moment. You might not remember every detail, but you remember the feeling. That mixture of longing and calm, like wanting someone close while also wanting to protect your own space. Remember that small sense of emptiness? It's not here to harm you. It's here to remind you that you care, that you feel deeply, that you notice emotional absence in a world that often rushes past it. There's something strangely comforting in admitting, even silently, that you feel lonely sometimes. Not because it feels good, but because it feels honest. You don't have to pretend tonight. You don't have to perform. You don't have to be the version of yourself that gets through busy days. Right now, you can just be the softer, quieter you. You might chuckle softly at how dramatic your inner monologue can sound. One minute you're thinking, "I should sleep," and the next minute your brain is writing a full-length emotional movie about your entire life. If overthinking burned calories, you'd probably be in amazing shape by now. A small, silly thought that lightens the heaviness just enough. You reflect on a truth many people quietly share. Loneliness doesn't always come from being alone. Sometimes it comes from feeling unseen. You can be surrounded by people and still feel like no one truly notices the quieter parts of you. That realization can feel heavy, but it can also feel validating. It means your emotional depth is real. You imagine telling someone gently, "Sometimes I feel like I disappear in the background." Even if you've never said it out loud, that thought might feel familiar. Tonight, you don't need someone else to hear it. It's enough that you acknowledge it for yourself. Philosophically, it's interesting how humans crave connection while also protecting their solitude. Maybe loneliness is just the space between wanting closeness and needing independence. Maybe it's not a flaw. Maybe it's part of the emotional rhythm of being alive. You recall a personal feeling moment. Perhaps a time you stayed up late, scrolling through old photos, smiling at memories while also feeling a faint ache. You noticed how time changes everything. People drift, conversations end, priorities shift. And yet, those memories still carry warmth, even when they sting a little. There's a gentle humor in how nostalgia works too. One second you're sentimental, the next you're laughing at your old-fashioned choices or cringing at how seriously you took things. It's comforting to realize your past self was doing their best, even if their haircut was questionable. You begin to understand that loneliness can sometimes act like a quiet teacher. It shows you what you value, who you miss, and what kind of connection you long for. It might even push you to become kinder, more patient, more open-hearted over time. Remember that quiet thought from earlier tonight? The idea that you probably think more at night than you admit? That's part of this journey. Your nighttime mind is like a gentle confessional, revealing emotions you don't always have space to process during the day. You breathe in slowly, feeling the soft weight of the blanket, the stillness of the room, the subtle comfort of being allowed to feel exactly what you feel. There's no rush to fix anything. There's no pressure to solve your loneliness in one night. Tonight is only about sitting with it kindly. You might even smile again at yourself, realizing that even in loneliness you're still capable of warmth, humor, reflection, and hope. That's not weakness. That's emotional depth. And as you continue to listen, you carry this first truth forward. Your lonely nights don't make you broken. They make you human, thoughtful, and quietly tender. You stay with that quiet tenderness from earlier, the soft realization that your lonely nights don't make you broken. They reveal how deeply you feel. The room still feels hushed, like it's listening along with you, holding space for whatever memories decide to drift closer. Now your mind begins to wander toward the past, not in a sharp or painful way, but in that gentle, nostalgic way that feels like flipping through an old photo album at midnight. Memories have a strange softness at night. They lose their rough edges and become warmer, quieter, almost dreamlike. Everyone carries at least one memory they never talk about. Maybe yours is small, a childhood moment, a late-night conversation, a simple afternoon that meant more than you ever admitted. It doesn't have to be dramatic to stay with you. Sometimes the quietest memories leave the deepest emotional imprint. You might remember a time when you sat somewhere familiar, perhaps on a bed, a couch, a classroom chair, or the back seat of a car, listening to music that felt like it understood you better than people did. The world outside kept moving, but in that moment, everything felt paused, suspended in a calm little bubble of feeling. There's something comforting about how nostalgia works. It lets you revisit moments that shaped you, even if you can't fully explain why they mattered. You can almost feel the temperature of the air back then, hear the faint sounds in the background, sense the emotional tone of who you were at that time. People still wonder why some feelings never fade. Maybe it's because emotions are stored in layers, like soft echoes that resurface when you least expect them. A smell, a song, a phrase, any of them can quietly unlock a memory you thought had faded away. You think of a personal feeling anecdote, perhaps a night when you stumbled across an old message or photo and suddenly felt a wave of warmth mixed with a little ache. You might have smiled at the memory, even as you realized how much time had passed. It's strange how time can feel both distant and close at once. Remember that quiet loneliness from earlier tonight? Nostalgia often sits right beside it. Sometimes you miss not just people but versions of yourself. The you who laughed more freely, worried less, or dreamed a little more boldly. That longing doesn't mean you want to go back. It just means you appreciate who you used to be. There's a soft humor in revisiting your past too. You might laugh at how seriously you took small problems, or how dramatic you felt over things that now seem minor. It's kind of sweet, like watching a younger version of yourself trying their best, even if they were a little over the top. You can almost imagine giving them a gentle pat on the shoulder and saying, "You were doing okay." One relatable emotional truth is that memories often feel safer than the present. The past is already written, already survived, already understood in hindsight. When the present feels uncertain, your mind sometimes retreats into memories because they feel familiar and controlled. You recall a moment from your childhood, maybe a quiet evening at home, the sound of a television in the background, or the comfort of falling asleep while voices murmured in another room. Even if life wasn't perfect, there might have been small pockets of safety that still bring a faint sense of calm. Philosophically, it's interesting how memory shapes identity. You are not just who you are right now, you are also every version of yourself that came before this moment. Each memory, no matter how small, contributes to the emotional landscape that makes you uniquely you. You might find yourself thinking, "I wish I could feel that simple again." But maybe it's not about returning to the past, maybe it's about carrying the softness of those memories into the present. The warmth you felt then can still exist now, just in quieter, more mature forms. There's another gentle humor moment as your brain insists on replaying slightly embarrassing memories. You know the ones, the awkward comment, the cringy text, the outfit you once thought looked amazing. Your mind loves to bring those up at the worst times, like it's hosting a late-night blooper reel of your life. At least you can laugh softly and think, "Wow, I've grown since then." You reflect on how nostalgia can feel like both a comfort and a weight. On one hand, it reminds you of love, connection, and meaningful moments. On the other hand, it can stir longing, for people you no longer talk to, places that changed, or times that can't be recreated. Yet even that longing can be gentle. It doesn't have to hurt. It can simply remind you that your heart is capable of deep attachment, deep appreciation, and deep emotional memory. You think back to a quiet scene. Maybe you were lying in bed years ago, listening to rain, imagining your future. You might have wondered what kind of person you'd become. Tonight, you are living in that future version. Imperfect, evolving, still learning. Remember that thought from earlier tonight about feeling unseen? Nostalgia sometimes carries the comfort of feeling understood by your past self. Even if no one else fully knew how you felt back then, you can look back now and say, I see you. I remember. There's a subtle gratitude that can come from this reflection. Even the difficult memories prove that you survived, learned, adapted. Even the joyful ones remind you that you've experienced warmth and connection, even if it felt fleeting. You notice how your body feels as you think. Perhaps your shoulders relax a little, your breathing slows, your mind softens. Nostalgia, when held gently, can act like an emotional blanket, wrapping you in a sense of continuity and meaning. Another relatable truth surfaces. Everyone edits their memories over time. What once felt intense might now feel softer. What once seemed insignificant might now feel precious. Your perspective shifts, and that's okay. It's part of growing. You smile faintly at the idea that your mind is like a storyteller, rearranging scenes from your life into a soft nighttime narrative. Some parts are romanticized, some parts are exaggerated, and some parts are hilariously dramatic. Like that time you thought a small inconvenience was the end of the world. And yet all of it matters. Every memory, awkward, joyful, bittersweet, forms a thread in the story of you. As you settle deeper into this reflective mood, you carry forward another quiet realization. Your memories don't trap you in the past. They can comfort you, teach you, and gently remind you of how far you've come. Just like that lonely feeling from earlier, these lingering memories aren't here to overwhelm you. They're here to sit beside you in the dark, like soft companions whispering, you've lived, you've felt, you've grown. And tonight that's enough. You carry those gentle memories forward, like small lanterns glowing softly in the back of your mind. The nostalgia hasn't vanished, it's simply settled into a quieter place, leaving room for something else now, the comforting presence of silence. The night feels different at this hour. Not empty, just spacious. The kind of silence that doesn't judge you, rush you, or expect anything from you. It simply exists, steady and patient, like a calm companion sitting beside you in the dark. Everyone carries at least one memory they never talk about. Sometimes, those memories surface more easily in silence. Not because the quiet forces them out, but because it feels safe enough to let them breathe. When the world stops making noise, your inner world finally has room to speak. You might notice how still everything feels. The soft hum of a fan, the distant sound of traffic, the faint creak of a building settling. These tiny sounds don't interrupt the silence. They blend into it, becoming part of a soothing nighttime rhythm. Remember that lonely feeling from earlier tonight? Silence often sits right next to it, not as an enemy but as a gentle cushion. Loneliness can feel sharp in a loud, busy world. But in silence, it can soften, becoming more reflective than painful. You think of a personal feeling moment. Perhaps a time when you stayed up late, sitting in a dim room, not doing anything productive, just existing. Maybe you stared out a window, watched shadows shift, or listened to the faint ticking of a clock. It might have felt strange at first, and then strangely peaceful. There's a relatable emotional truth here. Silence can feel uncomfortable until you realize it doesn't require you to perform. In the quiet, you don't have to impress anyone, respond to anyone, or keep up appearances. You can simply be. People still wonder why some feelings never fade. Perhaps silence keeps them alive, not in a painful way but in a preserved, gentle way. It allows emotions to settle into a softer form, where they can be understood instead of feared. You might smile softly at how your brain behaves in quiet moments. It can either become wise and philosophical, or wildly dramatic. One minute you're thinking deep thoughts about life's meaning, and the next minute you're replaying an awkward conversation from years ago like it's an award-winning drama. Your mind is truly a creative storyteller, sometimes a little too creative. There's a small, comforting humor in that. If your overthinking had a job title, it would probably be Nighttime Executive of Unnecessary Flashbacks. At least you can laugh gently and think, all right brain, let's calm down. Silence also has a way of slowing time. Without constant distractions, moments stretch out, becoming softer, longer, more breathable. You might feel like you have more emotional space to feel, to reflect, to rest. You recall a quiet scene. Maybe you once sat alone with a warm drink, watching steam rise, letting your thoughts drift without forcing them anywhere. It might have been one of those rare moments when you felt both peaceful and aware of yourself at the same time. Philosophically, silence raises an interesting idea. Maybe we don't always need answers. Maybe sometimes we just need stillness. Not to solve every feeling, but to allow those feelings to exist without pressure. You reflect on how silence can feel like a soft reset. During the day, your mind is crowded with tasks, conversations, expectations, and noise. At night, silence gently clears the mental clutter, leaving behind only what truly matters. Remember that nostalgic warmth from earlier tonight? Silence can make those memories feel clearer but also less heavy. It's as if the quiet wraps them in a layer of calm, turning emotional echoes into soft whispers. Another relatable truth: many people secretly crave silence but feel guilty admitting it. Wanting quiet doesn't mean you don't love people. It often means you're trying to recharge your emotional energy. Silence can be an act of self-care. You imagine telling yourself, it's okay to enjoy being alone with your thoughts. Even if that idea once felt uncomfortable, tonight it might feel more acceptable, more natural. There's another gentle humor moment as you notice how dramatic silence can make ordinary things seem. A tiny sound suddenly feels like a major event. A floor creak becomes a mystery, a stomach growl becomes a full emotional subplot. Nighttime really knows how to amplify everything. Yet beneath that lightheartedness, silence holds a deeper comfort. It gives you permission to slow down, to stop rushing through your feelings, to sit with them at a pace that feels manageable. You think back to a quiet thought from earlier, the realization that you feel deeply even when you don't talk about it. Silence can feel like a safe container for those deeper emotions. You don't have to explain them, you can simply experience them. A personal feeling anecdote surfaces. Maybe there was a time you turned off your phone, dimmed the lights, and let yourself sit in stillness. At first it might have felt awkward. But gradually your breathing slowed, your mind softened, and your emotions felt less tangled. There's something almost sacred about that kind of quiet. It creates a space where your inner world can gently unfold, without being interrupted or judged. People often fear silence because they think it will reveal something scary. But often what it reveals is tenderness, small hopes, quiet regrets, subtle gratitude, and gentle dreams. You smile faintly at how silence can feel like a soft blanket for your thoughts. Instead of overwhelming you, it cushions you, reminding you that you don't have to react to every emotion instantly. Another philosophical line drifts through your mind. Maybe silence isn't the absence of sound, maybe it's the presence of awareness. In the quiet, you become more aware of your feelings, your memories, your breathing, your humanity. You recall the lonely emotion from section 1 and the nostalgic reflections from section 2. Now, silence feels like the bridge between them, the space where both can exist peacefully without overwhelming you. There's one more gentle humor moment as you realize how your mind tries to fill silence with random thoughts. One second you're calm, the next you're planning imaginary conversations or thinking about what you'd say if you won an award you'll probably never compete for. Your brain is impressively imaginative. Still, even those wandering thoughts don't feel threatening tonight. They feel softer, slower, more manageable in this quiet space. You begin to feel a subtle shift, a growing comfort with stillness, a soft acceptance of being alone with your thoughts, a calm awareness that silence doesn't have to feel empty. Another relatable truth settles in. Sometimes the most healing conversations are the ones you have silently with yourself. No pressure, no interruption, just honesty and presence. As you breathe slowly, you realize that silence isn't here to isolate you. It's here to give you room. Room to feel, room to rest, room to exist without expectation. And as this section fades into the next, you carry forward a gentle understanding. The silent nights don't take something away from you, they quietly give you peace, space, and emotional breathing room. You remain in that soft quiet from earlier, where silence feels less like emptiness and more like a gentle companion. The night continues to hold you in a calm, unhurried way, giving your thoughts space to settle and your emotions permission to surface. Now, your mind drifts toward the feelings you rarely say out loud, the small, tender emotions you carry quietly, like folded letters in a hidden pocket. Unspoken feelings often feel heavier than spoken ones, not because they're dramatic, but because they stay suspended inside you, waiting for acknowledgement. Everyone carries at least one memory they never talk about. Along with that memory often comes an emotion you never fully expressed. Gratitude you didn't voice, love you didn't confess, regret you kept to yourself, or appreciation that arrived too late to say aloud. You might think of a moment when you wanted to say something meaningful, but the words felt too vulnerable to release. Maybe you wanted to tell someone you cared more than you let on, or to apologize, or to admit you were struggling. Instead, you stayed quiet, not out of coldness but out of fear, uncertainty, or tenderness. There's a relatable emotional truth here. Many of the deepest feelings in people's lives remain unspoken. Not because they don't matter, but because they matter so much that they feel fragile. You're not strange for carrying emotions you never shared, you're human. You recall a personal feeling anecdote, perhaps a night when you typed a long message to someone, read it over, and then deleted it instead of sending it. The words felt honest but also too revealing. So they stayed in your mind, echoing softly instead of reaching the other person. Remember that quiet loneliness from earlier tonight? Unspoken feelings often sit right beside it. Sometimes loneliness isn't about being alone. It's about having emotions you don't know how to express, or not knowing who would truly understand if you did. There's a gentle humor in how we handle unspoken emotions. You might replay imaginary conversations in your head where you finally say everything perfectly, delivering heartfelt speeches, clever comebacks, and emotional mic drop moments. Meanwhile, in real life you might struggle to even say, "I miss you." Your brain can be a dramatic screenwriter with a very shy main character. People still wonder why some feelings never fade. Maybe it's because emotions that are never expressed don't get closure. They linger in a softer, quieter form, becoming part of your inner landscape. You might carry a soft regret about something you never said, a compliment you withheld, a thank you forgot, or a goodbye that felt unfinished. That regret doesn't have to hurt tonight. It can simply exist as a reminder of how much you care. Philosophically, it's interesting how language sometimes fails to capture what the heart feels. Not every emotion fits neatly into words. Some feelings are too complex, too layered, too delicate to explain clearly. Silence in those cases isn't always avoidance. Sometimes it's respect for the depth of the feeling. You think of a quiet scene. Maybe you once sat across from someone you cared about, feeling 1,000 emotions, but only managing to talk about small, ordinary things. On the surface, the conversation seemed simple. Beneath it, your heart was full. Another gentle humor moment surfaces as you realize how dramatic your inner monologue can be. In your head, you're delivering poetic, emotional confessions worthy of a movie soundtrack. In reality, you might just say, "Yeah, I'm fine." It's almost funny how much emotion can live behind such simple words. There's also something tender about the feelings you keep to yourself. They often reveal your softer side, your empathy, your longing, your gratitude, your quiet love. Keeping them unspoken doesn't make them meaningless. In some ways, it makes them more intimate. Remember the nostalgic warmth from earlier tonight? Some of those memories might be tied to unspoken feelings, things you wish you'd said to someone in the past, or emotions you didn't fully understand back then. Looking back now, you might see them more clearly. You begin to realize that unspoken feelings don't have to be burdens. They can be gentle reminders of your emotional depth. They show that you feel deeply, that you care, that you reflect, even when you don't always share it outwardly. Another relatable truth settles in. Many people assume everyone else expresses their emotions easily, but most people carry a quiet emotional world they rarely reveal. You're not alone in holding back words, you're part of a quiet majority. You imagine speaking kindly to yourself, "It's okay that I didn't say everything. I was doing the best I could with what I felt at the time." That self-forgiveness can feel soothing, like releasing pressure you didn't realize you were carrying. There's another small humor moment as your brain decides to replay old unsent messages at the worst possible times. Like when you're trying to relax or fall asleep. It's almost like your mind says, "Now that you're comfy, let's revisit every emotional conversation you never had." You can gently laugh and think, "All right, brain, we'll handle that tomorrow." People still wonder why emotional honesty can feel so scary. Maybe it's because opening up feels like standing in soft emotional light, warm but vulnerable. Keeping feelings unspoken can sometimes feel safer, even if it leaves a faint ache. You recall a personal feeling moment. Perhaps a time when someone said something kind to you and you wanted to express how much it meant, but you downplayed it instead. Tonight, you can quietly acknowledge that gratitude even if you never said it out loud. Philosophically, maybe unspoken feelings aren't wasted. Maybe they still shape you, soften you, and teach you empathy. Even when words aren't shared, emotions can influence how you treat others, how you love, how you understand pain. Remember that thought from earlier about silence giving your emotions room to breathe? Unspoken feelings often live comfortably in silence. They don't always need to be announced. Sometimes they just need to be felt and accepted. You might think of an emotion you've been carrying quietly, a soft affection, a lingering apology, a private hope. Tonight, you don't have to judge it or resolve it. You can simply let it exist, gently, without pressure. There's a comforting realization here. Not every feeling needs immediate action. Some emotions are meant to stay internal, to mature over time, to transform slowly into wisdom or peace. Another gentle humor moment arises as you realize how much emotional energy you've spent overthinking whether to say something, sometimes longer than the conversation itself would have lasted. If indecision were an Olympic sport, you'd probably have a few medals by now. Yet beneath that humor there's warmth. The fact that you think so carefully before speaking shows your sensitivity, your thoughtfulness, your desire not to hurt others. You connect this moment back to the earlier sections. The loneliness you felt, the memories you revisited, the silence that comforted you. Unspoken feelings tie all of those together. They live in loneliness, echo in memories, and rest quietly in silence. Another relatable truth surfaces. Sometimes the most important conversations are the ones you have with yourself. You can acknowledge your own feelings, validate them, and hold them with kindness, even if no one else ever hears them. You breathe slowly, feeling the gentle rhythm of the night. The weight of unspoken emotions begins to feel lighter, not because they've disappeared but because you're no longer judging yourself for having them. People often believe that expressing everything is the only way to heal. But sometimes healing comes from simply understanding what you feel, even if you keep it private. You realize that your unspoken feelings don't make you weak, they make you nuanced, reflective, and emotionally rich. They're proof that your inner world is alive with meaning. As this section draws to a close, you carry forward a soft understanding. The feelings you never said out loud still matter. They still shape you. They still deserve gentleness. And tonight, you can let them rest beside you, not as burdens but as quiet, tender parts of your emotional story. You carry those quiet, unspoken feelings with you as the night continues to unfold, and now your thoughts drift toward something softer, heavier, and surprisingly tender, the small regrets you keep tucked away, and the gentle forgiveness you're slowly learning to give yourself. Not the dramatic regrets people talk about in movies. Not life-shattering mistakes, but the quiet, everyday ones. The little "I wish I had" moments. The soft, "I could have handled that better" thoughts. The tiny decisions that replay in your mind when the world grows quiet. Everyone carries at least one memory they never talk about. Often, that memory is tied to a small regret, something you wish you'd said differently, done more kindly, or understood sooner. These regrets don't shout. They whisper. And at night, whispers feel louder. You might think of a time you replay often. Maybe you snapped at someone when you were tired. Maybe you avoided an opportunity because you felt afraid. Maybe you didn't reach out to someone when you could have. None of it makes you a bad person. It makes you human, reflective, thoughtful, and aware. There's a relatable emotional truth here. Everyone has moments they wish they could gently rewrite. Even the kindest people, even the strongest people, even the people who seem to have it all together. Regret is not a sign of failure. It's a sign that you care. You recall a personal feeling anecdote, perhaps a night when you lay in bed replaying a conversation from years ago, thinking of a better response long after it mattered. You might have sighed and thought, "Why didn't I say that back then?" And then laughed softly at how your mind insists on becoming a perfect communicator only after the moment has passed. Remember that lonely feeling from earlier tonight? Regret often sits beside loneliness, not because you did something terrible but because you wish you had shown more warmth, more honesty, more courage. It can feel like a quiet ache, but it doesn't have to feel like punishment. There's a gentle humor in how regret works. Your brain will forgive you for forgetting passwords and losing keys, but it will absolutely refuse to forget that mildly awkward thing you said 5 years ago. It's like your mind keeps a highlight reel of tiny mistakes, complete with dramatic background music. You can almost laugh and think, "All right, brain, we get it." You're very thorough. People still wonder why some feelings never fade. Maybe regret lingers because it carries a lesson, not meant to shame you but to soften you. It teaches empathy, patience, humility, and growth, even when it feels uncomfortable. Philosophically, it's interesting how regret can point you toward the person you want to become. When you think, "I wish I had been kinder," it means kindness matters to you. When you think, "I wish I had been braver," it means courage lives somewhere inside you. Regret can reveal your values, not just your mistakes. You think of a quiet scene. Maybe you once lay awake late at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying a small moment, a missed chance, a misunderstood message, a tone that came out wrong. At the time, it might have felt heavier than it needed to. Tonight, it feels softer, more like a reminder than a wound. Another gentle humor moment drifts in as you realize how dramatic your inner critic can be. You might think, "Wow, I really acted like the villain in that moment," even though the reality was probably something minor and very human. Your mind sometimes loves to turn small slip-ups into epic tragedies. There's something tender about the way you care enough to regret things. It means you reflect. means you learn. It means you don't move through life carelessly. That's not something to be ashamed of, it's something to appreciate. Remember the silence from earlier tonight? Regret often feels louder in quiet moments. But that same silence can also soften it. When you sit with your regrets gently instead of judging yourself, they begin to lose their sharpness. You begin to shift from regret toward forgiveness, not in a dramatic, instant way but in a slow, gentle way. Soft forgiveness. The kind that doesn't erase the past but releases the need to punish yourself for it. There's a relatable emotional truth here. Most people are harder on themselves than anyone else ever could be. You might replay a small mistake again and again even though everyone else forgot it long ago. Tonight, you can practice being a little kinder to yourself than usual. You imagine speaking gently to your past self. You didn't know better yet. You were trying. You were learning. That doesn't excuse mistakes, it contextualizes them. It turns shame into growth. You recall a moment when you finally forgave yourself for something small. Maybe it was realizing that you handled a situation imperfectly, and that it was okay. That you were allowed to be human. That perfection was never the goal. Another light humor moment arises as you think about how much energy regret can consume. If replaying old mistakes counted as cardio, you'd probably qualify for an Olympic team by now. And yet, here you are, still growing, still learning, still allowed to rest. People still wonder why self-forgiveness can feel harder than forgiving others. Maybe it's because you know all your own intentions, doubts, and thoughts. But knowing more about yourself should lead to more compassion, not less. You think back to the unspoken feelings from earlier. Some regrets are tied to words you never said, apologies you didn't offer, gratitude you didn't express, feelings you kept hidden. Tonight, you don't have to fix the past. You only have to soften how you carry it. Philosophically, maybe regret isn't meant to trap you. Maybe it's meant to guide you. To nudge you toward kinder choices, gentler words, and more mindful moments in the future. You recall another personal feeling anecdote. Perhaps you once made a small mistake that felt huge at the time, only to look back years later and realize it was part of your growth. It didn't ruin you. It shaped you. Remember that nostalgic warmth from earlier tonight? Some regrets sit beside fond memories, moments that were imperfect but meaningful. Life rarely gives you perfect scenes, it gives you real ones. There's another gentle humor moment as you imagine rewriting your past with your current wisdom. You'd probably deliver flawless speeches, make perfect decisions, and somehow never say anything awkward. But then again, that version of you might lose the charm, sincerity, and authenticity of the real you. Another relatable truth settles in. Growth often comes from the moments you wish you'd handled differently. If you had never made mistakes, you might never have learned empathy, patience, or understanding. You begin to feel a soft shift, from criticizing yourself to comforting yourself. Instead of thinking, why did I do that? You might start thinking, I've learned from that. That small change in tone can feel incredibly freeing. People often believe forgiveness is something you give others. But tonight, forgiveness becomes something you offer yourself, gently, slowly, without pressure. You connect this back to earlier sections. The loneliness, the memories, the silence, the unspoken emotions. Regret weaves through all of them. But now, forgiveness begins to weave through them too, softening the emotional fabric of your night. You breathe in slowly, feeling your body relax just a little more. The regrets you carry don't feel erased, they feel lighter. Not gone but gentler. Not sharp but rounded at the edges. Another philosophical thought settles in. Maybe you're not meant to be proud of every choice, but you are allowed to be proud of your growth. You allow yourself a quiet moment of self-compassion. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to rewrite your past. You only have to keep moving forward with more kindness than before. As this section eases into the next, you carry forward a comforting realization. Your small regrets don't define you, but your soft forgiveness can heal you. You carry that softness of self-forgiveness forward, like a warm scarf draped loosely around your thoughts. The night continues to feel gentle, and now your mind drifts toward people. Not the ones physically near you, but the ones who feel emotionally distant yet still quietly close in your heart. You think about connections that once felt strong, then slowly faded. Not always because of conflict, sometimes simply because of time, distance, busyness, or life unfolding in different directions. These connections don't always hurt. Sometimes they feel like soft echoes, still warm even as they grow quieter. Everyone carries at least one memory they never talk about. Often, it involves someone who used to matter more than they do now, or someone who still matters but from afar. You might have a name that instantly brings back a feeling, even if you haven't spoken in years. There's a relatable emotional truth here. People can remain meaningful to you even when they're no longer part of your daily life. Connection doesn't always end. Sometimes it just transforms into a quieter, more distant version of itself. You recall a personal feeling anecdote. Maybe there's someone you used to talk to late at night, sharing jokes, dreams, or random thoughts. Now, the conversations have stopped, but when you hear a song or see something familiar, you still think of them for a moment. Not painfully, just softly. Remember that nostalgic warmth from earlier tonight? Distant connections often live in that same space. Gentle, bittersweet, and oddly comforting. You don't necessarily want to go back in time. You just appreciate that those moments once existed. There's something tender about how humans can carry emotional bonds long after circumstances change. Even if you don't reach out, even if you've both moved on in different ways, the connection can still feel like a quiet thread in your memory. You might smile faintly at how your mind randomly brings people back into your thoughts at the most unexpected times. You'll be doing something ordinary, washing dishes, scrolling your phone, lying in bed, and suddenly someone from your past appears in your mind like a surprise cameo. Your brain really loves surprise guest appearances. That's one of those gentle humor moments. Realizing your mind is basically a late-night casting director, reintroducing old characters without any warning. You can almost think, ah yes, the nostalgic special episode. People still wonder why some feelings never fade. Maybe certain connections linger because they shaped you in subtle ways, teaching you kindness, laughter, patience, vulnerability, or love in its quieter forms. Philosophically, it's interesting how relationships don't always end cleanly. Some fade like sunsets, slowly, beautifully, without a dramatic conclusion. Maybe closure isn't always about final words. Sometimes it's about quiet acceptance. You think of a quiet scene. Perhaps you once sat scrolling through old messages, noticing how the tone changed over time, from frequent replies to occasional check-ins to silence. Instead of feeling hurt, you might feel a soft appreciation that those words ever existed at all. Remember that loneliness from section 1? Distant connections can sometimes ease that feeling. Even if you're alone now, the memory of past warmth reminds you that you've been cared for, understood, and valued before, and that it can happen again. Another gentle humor moment arises as you think about how awkward reconnecting can feel. You might imagine sending a message like, "Hey, remember me from 7 years ago?" and immediately overthinking every word. Your mind turns a simple greeting into a full emotional strategy plan. It's oddly impressive. There's also a quiet beauty in letting some connections rest peacefully in memory. Not every bond needs to be revived. Some are meant to become soft chapters in your life story, meaningful, complete, and gently closed. You reflect on how distant connections can feel safer than current ones. The past doesn't demand replies, explanations, or emotional energy. It simply exists, unchanged, like a snapshot of who you once were with someone else. Another relatable truth settles in. Sometimes you miss the feeling more than the person. You miss how you felt around them, lighter, understood, playful, inspired. That longing doesn't mean you want to go back. It means you value the emotional growth that came from that time. You imagine a person you haven't thought about in a while. Someone who once made you laugh, supported you, or shared a meaningful moment. Tonight, instead of feeling sad, you can gently think, "I'm grateful our paths crossed." There's a personal feeling anecdote that surfaces. Maybe you once ran into someone from your past unexpectedly, a former friend, a classmate, an old acquaintance. The conversation might have felt slightly awkward, slightly warm, like revisiting an old room that hasn't changed much even though you have. Another light humor moment appears as you remember how your mind romanticizes old connections. In your memory, everyone becomes wiser, kinder, more emotionally articulate than they probably were in real life. Nostalgia really loves a glow-up. Yet beneath the humor, there's sincerity. Those distant connections represent chapters of your emotional life. Moments when you opened up, cared deeply, and allowed yourself to bond with others. You think back to the unspoken feelings from section 4. Some distant connections might involve words you never said, appreciation you didn't express, emotions you kept hidden, or apologies that stayed in your heart. Tonight, you can quietly acknowledge them without pressure to act. Philosophically, maybe people don't leave your life completely, maybe they stay as influences, lessons, and emotional imprints. Even if they're no longer present, their impact can remain. You notice how your body feels as you reflect, perhaps a slight warmth in your chest, a gentle relaxation in your shoulders. Thinking of distant connections doesn't have to feel heavy. It can feel like flipping through a book of meaningful moments. Another relatable truth: everyone has at least one connection that quietly shaped them more than they admit. You might not talk about it often, but it influenced how you love, how you trust, how you communicate. You recall the silence from earlier tonight. Silence can make distant connections feel louder, but in a soft way. It gives space for names, faces, and feelings to reappear without overwhelming you. There's a gentle humor moment as your brain randomly replays old inside jokes that no one else around you would understand anymore. You might smile to yourself like you're sharing a secret with your past. It's oddly comforting. You begin to feel a growing appreciation, not for what you lost but for what you experienced. Even if certain people are no longer in your life, the warmth they once brought still counts. People still wonder why the heart remembers certain people more than others. Maybe it's not about frequency of contact. Maybe it's about emotional significance. Some connections leave deeper imprints simply because they arrived at the right moment in your life. You connect this back to earlier sections. The loneliness, the memories, the silence, the unspoken feelings, the forgiveness. Distant connections weave through all of them, reminding you that your emotional story has been shaped by many different people, even if they're no longer present. Another philosophical line settles in. Maybe love doesn't always need proximity, sometimes it survives quietly in memory, gratitude, and growth. You think of one last gentle image, someone from your past smiling, laughing, or sharing a quiet moment with you. Instead of feeling sad, you allow yourself to feel thankful that the connection existed at all. You breathe in slowly, feeling a soft sense of emotional warmth, not tied to anyone specific, but to the idea that you've been capable of meaningful connection before, and you'll be capable of it again. As this section fades into the next, you carry forward a comforting realization. Even distant connections can still warm your heart, not as reminders of loss, but as proof of your capacity to care. You keep that gentle warmth from distant connections close to you, like a soft echo of voices that once mattered. And now your thoughts drift toward something quieter, more ordinary, and surprisingly meaningful. The small, everyday struggles you carry without making a big deal of them. Not the dramatic challenges people post about. Not the moments that demand applause or sympathy. But the subtle, daily efforts. Getting through a tiring day, holding yourself together when you feel overwhelmed, staying kind when you feel drained, showing up even when you'd rather hide under the covers. Everyone carries at least one memory they never talk about. Often it's a memory of a quiet struggle, a day you felt heavier than usual, a moment you almost gave up, a time you felt invisible while still pushing forward. There's a relatable emotional truth here. Most people fight their hardest battles in silence. You might look calm on the outside while quietly managing stress, self-doubt, tiredness, or emotional weight. And that effort, even if unseen, still matters. You recall a personal feeling anecdote. Perhaps there was a day when everything felt slightly harder than it should have. Getting out of bed took more effort. Small tasks felt strangely exhausting. You didn't want to explain it to anyone, so you just carried on, quietly, bravely, without drawing attention to it. Remember that lonely feeling from earlier tonight? Everyday struggles often sit right beside it. Sometimes loneliness isn't loud, it's woven into routines, hidden in the small effort it takes to keep going when you feel unmotivated or misunderstood. There's something deeply human about struggling with ordinary things. Paying bills, replying to messages, keeping promises, staying productive, maintaining relationships. None of it is glamorous, but all of it requires emotional energy. You might not give yourself enough credit for how much you manage each day. You might smile softly at how your mind turns small challenges into dramatic storylines. Forget one task and suddenly your brain is like, congratulations, you've ruined your entire life. It's one of those gentle humor moments, realizing your inner critic has a flair for exaggeration worthy of a late-night soap opera. People still wonder why small struggles can feel so heavy. Maybe it's because they're constant. Big problems come and go, but everyday pressures quietly stack up. Deadlines, expectations, self-comparisons, tiny worries about the future. Philosophically, it's interesting how resilience is often built through ordinary effort rather than dramatic triumph. Maybe strength isn't always about surviving major storms. Maybe it's about showing up on normal days when motivation feels low. You think of a quiet scene. Maybe you once sat at your desk, staring at a to-do list that felt longer than your energy. Instead of giving up, you did one small thing. Replied to one message, completed one task, made one tiny step forward. That moment didn't feel heroic, but it mattered. Another gentle humor moment arises as you think about how often you pretend to have your life together. You might confidently say, "Yeah, I've got this," while internally running on coffee, hope, and a slightly chaotic mental schedule. You're basically a functional masterpiece held together by reminders and good intentions. There's tenderness in recognizing your own effort. Even when you feel like you're not doing enough, you're still doing something, still trying, still learning, still showing up in your own imperfect way. Remember the self-forgiveness from section 5? Everyday struggles often come with self-criticism. You might think, why can't I handle this better? But tonight you can soften that voice and think instead, I'm doing the best I can with the energy I have. Another relatable truth settles in. Progress often looks slower and messier than we expect. Growth doesn't always feel inspiring. Sometimes it feels like repeating the same lessons, stumbling a little and trying again anyway. You recall a personal feeling anecdote. Perhaps there was a time you felt proud of something small. Finishing a task you'd been procrastinating, finally sending a difficult message, or simply getting through a hard day. No one else may have noticed, but you knew it took effort. People still wonder why humans tend to downplay their quiet resilience. Maybe it's because we compare our behind-the-scenes struggles to everyone else's highlight reels. But what you carry, the small effort, the steady endurance, is just as meaningful. There's another light humor moment as you think about how productivity advice often sounds unrealistic. Wake up at 5 a.m., meditate, journal, exercise, build an empire. Meanwhile, you're celebrating managing to respond to emails and drink water. Honestly, that's still impressive. You reflect on how everyday struggles shape your empathy. When you know what it feels like to feel overwhelmed, tired, or unsure, you become more understanding of others. Your quiet challenges make you gentler, not weaker. Philosophically, maybe life isn't about constant breakthroughs. Maybe it's about learning to find peace in repetition, effort, and imperfect routines. There's beauty in persistence, even when it feels unremarkable. Remember the silence from earlier tonight? In quiet moments, you might realize how much you carry daily without acknowledging it. The mental load, the emotional weight, the quiet expectations, they don't disappear just because no one talks about them. You imagine speaking kindly to yourself. It's okay if today felt hard. It's okay if you didn't do everything perfectly. You still showed up. That kind of internal reassurance can feel more soothing than any external praise. Another gentle humor moment appears as you think about how your brain sometimes treats minor setbacks like world-ending events. Miss one deadline and suddenly it feels like your entire future is doomed. Your mind really loves high-stakes drama for low-stakes situations. Yet beneath that humor, there's compassion. You care about doing well. You care about meeting expectations. You care about growing. That pressure comes from wanting to be responsible, not from being inadequate. You think back to the distant connections from Section 6. Some everyday struggles might involve maintaining relationships, responding to messages, staying in touch. Small emotional efforts that often go unnoticed. Even trying counts. Another relatable truth. Sometimes just getting through the day is an achievement. You don't always need big goals or grand accomplishments. Some days, simply surviving with kindness is enough. You recall a quiet scene. Maybe you once walked home after a long day, feeling drained but slightly proud that you made it through. The world looked ordinary, but inside, you carried a quiet sense of accomplishment. People still wonder why we feel guilty for resting. Maybe it's because we associate worth with productivity. But tonight, you can allow yourself to feel worthy simply for existing, not for constantly achieving. Philosophically, perhaps peace isn't found only in big victories. Maybe it's found in accepting the rhythm of effort, rest, progress, and pause. A soft, sustainable pace. You connect this back to earlier sections. The loneliness, the memories, the silence, the unspoken feelings, the forgiveness, the distant connections. Everyday struggles run through all of them. They're the background music of your emotional life. Another gentle humor moment surfaces as you realize how many, "I'll do it tomorrow," promises you've made to yourself. You might not always follow through, but at least your optimism is consistent. That counts for something. You begin to feel a subtle appreciation for yourself. Not for being perfect, but for continuing to try. For waking up again. For thinking, reflecting, caring, improving even when it feels slow. Another philosophical line settles in. Maybe resilience isn't about never feeling tired. Maybe it's about letting yourself feel tired and still choosing to keep going gently. You breathe slowly, noticing a soft easing in your chest. The everyday struggles you carry don't feel as heavy tonight. Not because they've vanished, but because you're viewing them with more kindness. There's a comforting realization here. Your quiet efforts matter even when no one applauds them. Even when they feel small. Even when you doubt yourself. As this section drifts toward the next, you carry forward a gentle understanding. Finding peace in everyday struggles doesn't mean pretending they don't exist. It means honoring your effort, softening your self-judgment, and allowing yourself to move forward at your own pace. You carry that quiet respect for your everyday efforts forward, and now your thoughts begin to soften into something warmer. A gentle awareness of the small, hidden blessings you often overlook. Not the big, dramatic moments people celebrate publicly, but the tiny comforts that quietly support you each day. The warmth of a blanket. The taste of a familiar drink. The calm of a peaceful night like this. the subtle feeling of being safe enough to rest. Everyone carries at least one memory they never talk about. Sometimes that memory isn't painful. Sometimes it's a soft, private moment of gratitude you never shared. A time you felt unexpectedly thankful for something simple and ordinary. There's a relatable emotional truth here. Many of life's most meaningful comforts are small enough to be missed if you're not paying attention. Gratitude doesn't always come with fireworks. Often, it arrives quietly like a soft sigh of relief. You recall a personal feeling anecdote. Perhaps there was a night when you felt overwhelmed, and something small grounded you. A comforting song, a warm shower, a message from someone you didn't expect. It didn't fix everything, but it softened the moment just enough to help you breathe. Remember that lonely feeling from earlier tonight? Gratitude can gently ease it, not by denying loneliness, but by reminding you that even in quiet moments, there are small pockets of warmth around you. You might notice how your mind tends to focus on what's missing rather than what's present. That's human. Your brain is wired to scan for problems, not to pause and say, hey, this moment is actually okay. Tonight, you can gently shift that focus. There's a small humor moment as you realize how selective your mind can be. You'll remember one awkward comment from years ago, but completely forget that you survived hundreds of ordinary days just fine. Your brain really has a flair for prioritizing chaos over calm. People still wonder why gratitude can feel difficult when life feels heavy. Maybe it's because gratitude isn't about pretending things are perfect. It's about noticing the small lights that still exist even in imperfect moments. Philosophically, it's interesting how gratitude can change your emotional perspective. The same life can feel overwhelming or comforting depending on what you choose to notice. Gratitude doesn't erase problems, it simply softens how they sit in your heart. You think of a quiet scene. Maybe you once paused in the middle of a normal day and realized something simple, like the way sunlight hit a wall, the sound of distant laughter, or the comfort of sitting in a familiar space. That moment might have felt surprisingly peaceful. Remember the silence from earlier tonight? Silence can make small blessings more noticeable. Without constant noise, you can hear your own breathing, feel the stillness of the room, and recognize how rare and calming this kind of quiet actually is. Another gentle humor moment appears as you think about how humans often take things for granted until they're gone. You might not appreciate good sleep until you can't get it. You might not appreciate calm until life feels chaotic. Your mind sometimes needs a reminder, or a small wake-up call, to recognize what's already good. There's something tender about practicing gratitude privately. You don't have to announce it or perform it. You can simply notice silently, I'm grateful for this small comfort, and let that thought warm you. You recall another personal feeling anecdote. Perhaps there was a time you felt unexpectedly thankful for something tiny, like receiving a kind smile, finding an old favorite song, or realizing you had a little more strength than you thought. No one else may have noticed, but it meant something to you. Another relatable truth settles in. Gratitude doesn't have to feel grand or spiritual. It can feel practical, gentle, and human. It can simply sound like, I'm glad this small thing exists. You connect this moment back to the everyday struggles from Section 7. Even on difficult days, there are often tiny wins. Getting through the morning, finishing one task, finding one peaceful moment. Those small wins deserve quiet appreciation. There's another light humor moment as you realize how dramatic your standards can be. You might think, I'll be grateful when everything in my life is perfect, while ignoring the fact that perfection is basically a fictional genre. Meanwhile, there's already plenty to appreciate, like surviving the day without accidentally sending an embarrassing message. People still wonder why gratitude feels more natural in hindsight. Maybe it's because you only realize the value of certain moments once they're gone. Tonight, you can practice noticing value while the moment is still here. Philosophically, maybe gratitude is a form of emotional grounding, a way to anchor yourself in the present instead of constantly worrying about the future or replaying the past. When you feel thankful, even briefly, your mind slows down. You think back to the nostalgic warmth from earlier tonight. Some of your fondest memories might be rooted in simple moments, laughing with someone, relaxing in a familiar place, feeling briefly understood. Those moments didn't need to be extraordinary to become meaningful. There's another gentle humor moment as you imagine thanking your past self for getting through awkward situations. You might think, thanks for surviving that cringeworthy phase, I wouldn't be here without you. It's oddly comforting to see your own growth as something worth appreciating. Another relatable truth surfaces. Gratitude doesn't require ignoring your pain. You can feel grateful and still feel lonely, tired, or uncertain. These emotions can coexist, like soft, overlapping layers rather than opposing forces. You recall a quiet scene. Maybe you once sat alone at night, feeling tired but also noticing something peaceful. The way your blanket felt, the way your room looked in dim light, the way your breathing slowly steadied. That small sense of comfort might have gone unnoticed, but it mattered. Remember the unspoken feelings from section 4? Some gratitude stays unspoken too. Appreciation you never expressed to someone, silent thankfulness for moments that shaped you. Tonight, you can gently acknowledge those feelings even if you never share them out loud. There's a soft warmth in realizing that even your difficult experiences may have brought hidden lessons or strength. Gratitude doesn't mean celebrating pain, it means recognizing growth that emerged from it. Another gentle humor moment arises as you think about how often you forget to appreciate yourself. You might thank others easily but forget to say, "Hey, I did my best today." Maybe tonight you can quietly give yourself some credit. People still wonder why gratitude can feel healing. Maybe it's because it shifts your attention from what's lacking to what's already supporting you, emotionally, physically, quietly. Philosophically, maybe gratitude is a reminder that even in imperfect lives, there are still small miracles, warm drinks, peaceful nights, shared laughter, personal resilience, second chances. You connect this back to earlier sections. The loneliness, the memories, the silence, the unspoken feelings, the forgiveness, the distant connections, the everyday struggles. Gratitude gently weaves through all of them, softening their emotional weight. Another light humor moment surfaces as you think about how easily you complain about minor inconveniences, like slow internet, while forgetting how incredible it is that you can even connect, listen, and unwind like this. Perspective can be surprisingly powerful. You begin to feel a subtle shift in your chest, a quiet warmth, a small easing, a gentle sense that not everything is heavy. Not everything is missing. Not everything is wrong. Another relatable truth settles in. Sometimes peace doesn't come from changing your life, it comes from noticing the good that already exists within it. You imagine whispering to yourself, "Thank you for getting through today." That small internal gratitude can feel soothing, like a soft pat on the back from your own heart. You think of one last gentle image, maybe the feeling of lying in bed right now, safe enough to rest, listening to a calm voice, letting your thoughts slow down. Even this moment can be a quiet blessing. You breathe slowly, feeling gratitude not as pressure but as softness. Not as obligation but as warmth. Not as perfection but as presence. As this section eases into the next, you carry forward a comforting realization. The small, hidden blessings in your life, though easy to miss, can quietly bring peace, warmth, and emotional steadiness when you allow yourself to notice them. You carry that quiet sense of gratitude forward, like a soft glow resting gently in your chest. And now your thoughts begin to settle into something even calmer. The idea of healing not as a dramatic breakthrough but as a slow, patient process, one thought at a time. Healing doesn't always feel inspiring. Sometimes it feels quiet, unremarkable, and almost invisible. It doesn't always look like a sudden transformation. More often it looks like tiny emotional shifts. A thought that hurts a little less than it used to, a memory that feels softer, a reaction that feels calmer than before. Everyone carries at least one memory they never talk about. Often healing begins around those memories, not by erasing them but by slowly changing how they feel inside you. Over time, what once felt sharp can become gentler, like a softened echo instead of a painful reminder. There's a relatable emotional truth here. Most healing happens in small, unnoticeable steps. You might not wake up one day feeling completely better. Instead, you might simply notice that a thought doesn't sting as much as it did last year, and that's progress even if it feels subtle. You recall a personal feeling anecdote, perhaps there was a time when a certain memory used to make your chest tighten. Then, slowly, over months or years, it began to feel less heavy. You didn't consciously decide to heal, it just happened gently as you lived, reflected, and kept going. Remember the self-forgiveness from section 5? Healing often grows out of that softness, out of choosing not to punish yourself for every past mistake, out of learning to speak to yourself with patience instead of criticism. There's a gentle humor moment as you realize how impatient your mind can be. You might think, why am I not healed yet? It's been years. As if emotional recovery follows a strict schedule. Your heart doesn't run on deadlines, it runs on gradual understanding. People still wonder why some feelings never fade. Maybe they don't disappear completely, maybe they simply transform. What once felt like pain can become wisdom. What once felt like heartbreak can become empathy. What once felt overwhelming can become a quiet reminder of your strength. Philosophically, healing might not be about forgetting, it might be about remembering without suffering. It's the ability to look back and say, that hurt, but it doesn't control me anymore. You think of a quiet scene, Maybe you once sat alone at night, replaying a difficult memory over and over. At the time it felt endless. Tonight you might notice that the same memory feels a little less intense, still present but less powerful. Another gentle humor moment arises as you realize how dramatic your inner voice can be during emotional healing. One day you feel calm and think, "I'm finally at peace." The next day a small reminder sends you spiraling and your mind says, "Never mind, we're back to square one." Healing can feel like emotional mood swings with a sense of irony. There's something reassuring in accepting that healing isn't linear. Some days feel lighter. Some days feel heavier. That doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're human, processing emotions in layers. Remember the everyday struggles from section 7? Healing often happens in the background of ordinary life. While you work, rest, scroll, talk, laugh, and keep going. You don't have to stop living in order to heal. Sometimes living is what heals you. Another relatable truth settles in. Healing can feel slow because it's deep. Quick fixes might feel satisfying, but real emotional change takes time. Your mind and heart need space to untangle feelings gently. You recall a personal feeling anecdote? Perhaps there was a moment when you realized you reacted differently to something that once triggered you. Instead of feeling overwhelmed, you felt calmer. Not because the past vanished, but because you'd grown stronger. People still wonder why healing often feels lonely. Maybe it's because much of it happens internally, quietly, without applause, without announcements. But even if no one sees it, your progress still matters. You connect this back to the silence from section 3. Silence can be a healing space, a place where emotions can settle, where thoughts can soften, where your mind can rest without pressure to perform. Another gentle humor moment appears as you think about how your mind expects instant emotional upgrades. You might imagine pressing a button labeled "fully healed," only to realize your heart prefers slow updates and occasional emotional bug fixes. There's tenderness in allowing yourself to heal at your own pace. You don't need to rush. You don't need to compare your progress to anyone else's. Your timeline is personal, shaped by your experiences, your sensitivity, your resilience. Remember the distant connections from section 6? Some healing involves letting go of old attachments, not with bitterness but with quiet acceptance. Over time, those emotional ties can transform into gratitude rather than longing. Philosophically, maybe healing is less about becoming someone new and more about returning to yourself. The calmer, wiser, softer version of who you've always been underneath the pain. You think of a quiet image. Maybe you once imagined your heart like a room that felt cluttered with old emotions. Over time, healing feels like slowly tidying that room, not rushing, just gently making space for peace. Another relatable truth surfaces. Sometimes healing feels boring. Not dramatic. Not cinematic. Just small, steady improvement. Fewer intrusive thoughts, softer reactions, more moments of calm. That kind of boring healing is actually a gift. You recall the unspoken feelings from section 4. Healing doesn't always require speaking every emotion. Sometimes it simply means understanding them, accepting them, and letting them rest more peacefully inside you. Another gentle humor moment arises as you think about how your mind tries to measure healing like a progress bar. Am I 40% healed yet? Meanwhile, your heart is quietly doing its work without caring about numbers. People still wonder why some wounds take longer to heal than others. Maybe it's because some experiences touch deeper parts of you, your identity, your sense of safety, your capacity to trust. Deep healing takes deep time. You reflect on how healing can sometimes feel like forgiveness. Not just forgiving others, but forgiving yourself for feeling hurt in the first place. You're allowed to have been sensitive. You're allowed to have been affected. You're allowed to take time to recover. Another relatable truth: healing doesn't mean you'll never feel sad again. It means sadness won't feel as overwhelming or consuming. It becomes a wave you can ride instead of a storm that drowns you. You connect this back to earlier sections. The loneliness, the memories, the silence, the unspoken feelings, the forgiveness, the distant connections, the everyday struggles, the gratitude. Healing slowly weaves through all of them, softening edges, easing pressure, building quiet resilience. Another gentle humor moment surfaces as you think about how your mind sometimes celebrates tiny wins like major achievements. Feeling calm for 5 minutes? Emotional milestone unlocked. And honestly, it kind of is. You begin to feel a soft reassurance. You don't need to rush your healing. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to feel fully better to deserve rest, comfort, and peace. People still wonder why healing often feels invisible. Maybe it's because the most important changes happen internally, in how you think, how you feel, how you respond, rather than in obvious external ways. Philosophically, maybe healing is simply the art of learning how to carry your past more gently. Not pretending it didn't happen, but refusing to let it define your present. You imagine whispering to yourself, "I'm allowed to heal slowly." That simple permission can feel like a deep exhale, releasing pressure you didn't realize you were holding. You think of one last gentle image, a version of yourself from the past struggling quietly, trying their best. Tonight, you can mentally place a comforting hand on their shoulder and say, "We're healing. We're getting there." You breathe slowly, feeling a soft sense of calm settle deeper into you. Healing doesn't have to feel dramatic tonight. It can simply feel like a little more peace than before. As this section fades into the next, you carry forward a comforting realization. Healing doesn't happen all at once. It happens in quiet moments, softened thoughts, gentle self-talk, and the slow, steady decision to keep moving forward with kindness. That gentle sense of healing continues to flow forward, settling into something even quieter, a softer understanding of love, especially the kind that doesn't shout, doesn't demand attention, and doesn't always look dramatic. Love that exists in quiet forms often goes unnoticed, yet it can be some of the most enduring and comforting love you'll ever experience. Not all love arrives with grand gestures. Sometimes it shows up as a simple text asking if you're okay, a silent presence when you don't feel like talking, or a familiar voice that makes you feel a little less alone. Quiet love doesn't overwhelm, it reassures. You might think of the kinds of love that never made a scene. Maybe someone once cared for you in a calm, steady way, no dramatic confessions, no emotional fireworks, just consistent kindness. At the time it might have felt ordinary. Looking back, it might feel incredibly meaningful. There's a relatable emotional truth here. We often expect love to feel intense, passionate, and cinematic. But the love that lasts is often gentle, patient, and stable. It's the kind of love that doesn't exhaust you, it steadies you. You recall a personal feeling anecdote. Perhaps there was a person who supported you quietly during a difficult time. They didn't offer dramatic advice. They just listened. Years later, that quiet support might feel more powerful than any loud declaration ever could. Quiet love also includes the love you show yourself. Small acts of care that don't feel impressive but matter deeply. Choosing to rest when you're tired. Choosing not to replay harsh self-criticism. Choosing to forgive yourself again even when you think you should already be over it. Remember the healing from section 9? Quiet love often plays a key role in that healing. Sometimes you don't need someone to fix your pain, you just need someone to sit with it without judgment. There's a gentle humor moment as you realize how your mind sometimes expects love to feel dramatic, like a movie scene with emotional music in the background. In reality, love often feels more like sharing snacks on a couch or sending memes late at night. People still wonder why quiet love can feel harder to recognize. Maybe it's because it doesn't scream for attention. It doesn't pressure you. It doesn't overwhelm your senses. It simply exists, steady, reliable, and warm. Philosophically, maybe the most powerful love is the kind that lets you breathe. Love that doesn't make you anxious. Love that doesn't make you feel like you're performing. Love that lets you be human, imperfect, and still worthy. You imagine a quiet scene, perhaps two people sitting in silence together, not feeling awkward, not feeling the need to fill the space, just sharing a calm presence. That kind of love doesn't need words to feel real. Another relatable truth surfaces. Sometimes we only recognize quiet love after it's gone or after time has passed. At first it felt normal. Later you realize it was rare, someone who cared without conditions, without drama, without expectation. You connect this back to distant connections from section 6. Some quiet love exists in memory, people who once cared for you in subtle ways. Even if they're no longer in your life, the emotional warmth they left behind can still comfort you. Another gentle humor moment arises as you think about how people sometimes overlook quiet love because it doesn't feel exciting enough. It's funny how the heart can crave chaos, then later crave peace. Quiet love can also exist in friendships. Someone who checks in on you, remembers small details about your life, or sits beside you when words feel unnecessary. That kind of love can feel like emotional safety. You reflect on how quiet love differs from loud affection. Loud love can feel thrilling but unstable. Quiet love often feels like a soft anchor, something that holds you steady when emotions get stormy. Remember the everyday struggles from section 7? Quiet love often supports you through those moments, not with dramatic speeches, but with subtle reassurance that you're not facing life alone. Another personal feeling anecdote comes to mind. Maybe you once felt cared for in a small, forgettable moment, someone saving you a seat, sharing food, sending a simple good luck. At the time, it might have seemed insignificant. Now it feels meaningful. There's something healing in realizing you don't need love to be loud to be real. Sometimes, love feels like a warm blanket, not flashy, not exciting, but deeply comforting. Philosophically, maybe love isn't about intensity, maybe it's about consistency. The people who stay. The feelings that remain. The care that doesn't disappear when things get complicated. Another gentle humor moment surfaces as you think about how your heart might have once ignored quiet love, only to later crave it. Emotional maturity can feel like realizing peace is more satisfying than chaos. You also think about quiet love in solitude. The way music can comfort you, the way a familiar place can make you feel safe, the way certain memories can feel like emotional companions. Quiet love can feel like permission. Permission to rest, to feel, to heal, to be imperfect without fear of rejection. You connect this back to silence from section 3. Silence can be a language of love, not empty but full of understanding. Not awkward but peaceful. Another relatable truth settles in. Sometimes the most sincere love is the kind that doesn't ask for anything in return. It exists simply because it cares. You imagine whispering to yourself, love doesn't always need to be loud to be real. That thought can feel like a small emotional revelation. People still wonder why they crave dramatic love stories. Maybe it's because drama feels exciting, but deep down, many hearts long for stability, reassurance, and quiet emotional safety. You think of one last gentle image, sitting in a calm space, feeling emotionally held, not by grand gestures but by subtle, steady warmth. That's the kind of love that feels safe to fall asleep with. As this section fades into the next, you carry forward a soft realization. Love doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives like a whisper, a presence, a quiet promise that you don't have to face everything alone. That quiet sense of love gently shifts into something more familiar, the soft, looping patterns of late-night overthinking. You know that feeling well. The room is dim, your body is tired, but your mind feels wide awake, replaying thoughts that seem smaller during the day. Late at night, your thoughts often grow louder even when everything else is silent. You revisit old conversations, imagine future worries, and gently criticize yourself over things that probably don't deserve so much attention. There's a relatable emotional truth here. Most people think more at night than they ever admit out loud. You might notice how your mind likes to collect tiny moments. A look someone gave you, a sentence you wish you had worded differently, a choice you keep re-examining. It can feel like your brain is tidying up emotional clutter, except it sometimes makes a bigger mess in the process. You recall a personal feeling anecdote. Maybe there was a night when you lay awake replaying a simple interaction, a casual comment, a small mistake, a moment you thought you handled poorly. At the time it felt huge. Looking back now, it might seem almost sweet how deeply you cared. There's a gentle humor in realizing how your mind can turn something minor into a dramatic late-night movie. One awkward sentence becomes a full emotional documentary. Your brain deserves an award for creativity, even if it sometimes uses that creativity against you. People still wonder why the mind becomes more active at night. Maybe it's because the world gets quieter, and your inner voice finally has room to speak. Or maybe it's because you feel safer thinking honestly when no one else is watching. Late-night overthinking often carries a mix of worry and nostalgia. You replay old memories, imagine different outcomes, and quietly wonder how things might have turned out if you'd chosen another path. Remember those lingering memories from section 2? At night, they often feel closer, softer, and more emotionally vivid. Another relatable truth surfaces. Sometimes you overthink not because you're anxious but because you care. You care about doing things right. You care about people's feelings. You care about becoming a better version of yourself, even when you're unsure how. You imagine a gentle scene, you lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of the night. Each thought floats by like a cloud. Some heavy, some light, some almost funny in how unnecessary they feel. Here's a soft philosophical line. People still wonder why some thoughts refuse to let go, even when they've lost their importance. Maybe it's because the mind seeks closure, even for moments that never truly needed it. You think back to the small regrets from section 5. Late-night overthinking often revives those regrets, but it also offers a chance to soften them. You can choose to treat those thoughts with kindness instead of judgment. Another gentle humor moment appears as you realize how your brain sometimes schedules emotional meetings at the worst possible hour. Of all the times to solve your life's biggest questions, it chooses 2 a.m. Late-night thoughts can also be surprisingly creative. You might come up with ideas, memories, or realizations that never show up during the day. It's as if the quiet gives your mind permission to wander more freely. You recall the quiet love from section 10, the steady, calm kind of care. That same gentleness can be applied to your own mind. Instead of fighting your thoughts, you can let them exist without needing to solve everything tonight. There's another relatable emotional truth. Not every thought needs an answer. Some thoughts just want to be acknowledged, then allowed to drift away. You imagine whispering to yourself, "I don't have to figure this out right now." That single sentence can feel like a small emotional release. Another personal feeling anecdote arises. Maybe there was a night when you worried endlessly about something that eventually resolved itself. Looking back, you might laugh softly at how intense the worry felt compared to how gently it ended. Here comes another gentle humor moment. Realizing that your mind sometimes panics over scenarios that never even happen. Your imagination deserves credit for effort, even if it's overly dramatic. You connect this back to everyday struggles from section 7. Overthinking often grows from ordinary worries, work, relationships, self-doubt, but at night, those worries can feel bigger than they really are. Philosophically, maybe overthinking is the mind's way of searching for meaning. It wants reassurance. It wants understanding. It wants to feel safe, even if it goes about it in a slightly chaotic way. You notice how calming it can be to treat your thoughts like passing waves instead of problems to solve. Let them rise, let them crest, let them fade. Another callback surfaces. Remember the quiet thought from earlier tonight? The idea that healing happens slowly? Late-night overthinking can become softer when you remind yourself that growth doesn't require immediate answers. You gently remind yourself that rest is more important than resolution right now. Sleep can sometimes solve what thinking cannot. You imagine placing your worries on an invisible shelf, telling them, "We'll talk tomorrow." Tonight is for rest, for softness, for calm. Another relatable truth settles in. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop thinking and allow yourself peace. As this section slowly fades, your late-night thoughts begin to feel less like enemies and more like gentle echoes. Reminders that you're human, that you care, that your mind is trying its best, even when it gets a little carried away. You let those thoughts soften, slow down, and drift, making space for quiet, for calm, and for the gentle sense that you don't need to figure everything out before you fall asleep. As those late-night thoughts begin to soften, something even quieter comes into focus. The tender feeling of being invisible, yet still deeply worthy of care. There are moments when you might feel overlooked, unheard, or quietly standing on the edges of conversations in rooms. It can feel like you're present but not always seen. There's a relatable emotional truth here. Almost everyone has felt invisible at least once in their life, even among people they care about. Sometimes it happens in loud social spaces. Other times it happens in quiet, ordinary moments, when your thoughts stay unspoken, your efforts go unnoticed, or your emotions feel too subtle to explain. You might remember a time when you wanted to say something meaningful, but the moment passed before you could speak. Maybe you thought, "It's not important," or, "Someone else probably feels this more strongly." That small hesitation can linger longer than expected. You recall a personal feeling anecdote. Perhaps there was a gathering where you sat quietly, listening more than speaking, smiling politely while feeling a little distant inside. No one meant to ignore you, yet you still felt like a background character in your own evening. There's gentle humor in noticing how you can sometimes feel invisible, even while secretly hoping someone will magically read your mind and notice your quiet brilliance. Your heart wants recognition, but it also doesn't want to make a fuss. A very polite emotional paradox. People still wonder why feeling unseen can hurt so much, even when no harm was intended. Maybe it's because being seen feels like proof that you matter, that your thoughts, your presence, and your quiet existence have meaning. Here's a soft philosophical reflection. Sometimes the deepest emotions live in the quietest people. Not everyone expresses themselves loudly, but that doesn't make their feelings any less real. You think back to the late-night overthinking from section 11. Feeling invisible can often fuel those thoughts. Replaying moments, wondering if you said enough, wondering if anyone noticed how hard you tried. Another relatable truth emerges. Just because you feel unseen doesn't mean you are unimportant. Often, it means your sensitivity, thoughtfulness, or gentleness simply goes unnoticed by people who aren't looking closely. You imagine a quiet scene, you walking through a familiar place, passing people who don't know your story, your struggles, or your small victories. To them you might seem ordinary. But inside, you carry entire worlds of memories, emotions, and quiet courage. There's another personal feeling anecdote. Maybe you once helped someone in a small way, offering support, kindness, or understanding without receiving recognition. At the time, it might have felt discouraging. Later, you might realize that quiet kindness still mattered, even without applause. Another gentle humor moment appears as you realize how sometimes you feel invisible, yet also secretly relieved when attention isn't on you. You want to be seen, but not too seen. Emotional introversion at its finest. You connect this back to the quiet love from section 10. Some love is expressed subtly, in listening, remembering, or simply staying present. Even if it isn't loud, it still counts. Even if it's quiet, it still holds warmth. Philosophically, maybe being invisible at times allows you to observe life more deeply. You notice small details others miss. The tone of a voice, the mood of a room, the unspoken emotions between people. You reflect on how invisibility can feel painful, but it can also feel like freedom. No pressure to perform. No need to impress. Just space to exist honestly. Another gentle humor moment arises as you think about how you can feel invisible in a group, yet extremely noticeable when you trip, drop something, or make a small mistake. Somehow, the universe always notices the awkward moments. There's another relatable emotional truth. Even when you feel unseen by others, you still deserve to be seen by yourself. Your own validation matters more than you might realize. You imagine whispering to yourself, "I see you." Your feelings count. Your presence matters. That quiet reassurance can feel like a soft emotional hand on your shoulder. You think back to the gratitude from section 8, the idea of noticing small, hidden blessings. Sometimes, being unseen allows you to appreciate moments without pressure or expectation. You can enjoy things just for yourself. Another philosophical line gently surfaces. People still wonder why some of the most meaningful lives are lived quietly, without recognition or applause. Maybe impact doesn't always need an audience. You recall the everyday struggles from section 7. Feeling invisible can be part of those struggles. Showing up, trying your best, and wondering if anyone notices. But your effort still matters even when it's silent. Another personal feeling anecdote returns. Maybe there was a time when someone unexpectedly noticed you, complimented your effort, acknowledged your presence, or thanked you sincerely. That small moment might have stayed with you longer than they ever realized. Another gentle humor moment slips in as you remember how one tiny compliment can stay in your memory for years, while 10 criticisms somehow vanish into thin air. The brain is selective like that. You reflect on how being unseen doesn't mean being unlovable. Often, it means your heart is soft, your voice is gentle, and your presence is calm. Qualities that some people quietly cherish, even if they don't always say it out loud. You connect this back to the healing from section 9. Part of healing can involve learning to value yourself, even when external validation feels scarce. Another relatable truth settles in. Sometimes the most important person who needs to notice you is you. You imagine letting go of the need to always be recognized, and instead resting in the quiet confidence that your existence has worth, even in silence. As this section slowly fades, the feeling of invisibility softens into something gentler. A reminder that being quiet doesn't make you less, that being subtle doesn't make you insignificant, and that even unseen hearts deserve tenderness, rest, and peace. That softened feeling of being unseen slowly transforms into something warmer, a delicate sense of hope that glows even in emotional darkness. It's not loud or dramatic hope. It's quiet, patient, and steady, like a small light you can carry with you when the night feels long. There's a relatable emotional truth here. Even in your most uncertain moments, a part of you still believes things can gently improve. You might not always feel optimistic, but there's often a subtle thread of hope woven into your thoughts. A quiet maybe that keeps you moving forward. You might remember a time when you felt discouraged, unsure if things would ever feel lighter, yet somehow they slowly did. Not all at once. Not dramatically. But in small, almost unnoticeable steps. You recall a personal feeling anecdote. Perhaps there was a period when you felt emotionally stuck, unsure about the future, replaying worries late at night. Then one day something small shifted, a kind conversation, a new perspective, a tiny opportunity, and suddenly the darkness felt a little less heavy. There's gentle humor in realizing how hope sometimes appears in the most unexpected ways. You could be in the middle of overthinking your entire life, and then suddenly feel encouraged because of a nice song, a funny message, or even a comforting snack. Emotional recovery powered by snacks. Truly a modern miracle. People still wonder why hope can survive even in difficult times. Maybe it's because the human heart quietly refuses to give up, even when it feels tired. Or maybe it's because somewhere inside you, there's a deep belief that your story isn't finished yet. You think back to late-night overthinking from section 11. Hope can feel like the gentle counterbalance. A soft reminder that not every thought leads to a negative ending, that not every worry becomes reality. Here's a philosophical reflection. People still wonder why some hearts continue to dream, even after disappointment. Maybe hope isn't about certainty. Maybe it's about allowing yourself to imagine better possibilities, even when you're unsure. You imagine a peaceful scene. You sitting quietly by a window at night, watching distant lights flicker in the darkness. Each light feels like a small reminder that life continues, that movement and warmth still exist beyond your worries. Another relatable truth surfaces. Sometimes hope doesn't feel like excitement, it feels like calm acceptance. Like thinking, I don't know how things will turn out, but I trust that I'll find a way. You connect this to healing from section 9. Healing often depends on quiet hope, the belief that your emotional state can soften over time, that wounds can become less painful, and that peace can gradually return. Another gentle humor moment appears as you realize how your mind can switch between everything is doomed and maybe everything will be okay within the same hour. Emotional whiplash, but make it soft. You reflect on how hope doesn't require perfection. You don't need to feel confident all the time. You don't need to have a perfect plan. Sometimes hope is simply choosing not to give up tonight. You recall the feeling of being invisible from section 12. Even if others don't always notice you, hope can remind you that your life still holds meaning, growth, and potential, even in quiet, unseen ways. Another personal feeling anecdote comes to mind. Maybe there was a time when you doubted yourself deeply, but later realized you were stronger than you thought. At the time you couldn't see it. Looking back, you might feel grateful that you didn't give up. There's another gentle humor moment as you remember how hope sometimes sneaks in disguised as procrastination. You tell yourself, I'll figure it out later, and somehow later actually works out. You think about quiet hope in everyday life. Waking up and trying again, sending a message even when you feel nervous, taking one small step even when you feel unsure. Another relatable truth settles in. Hope doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. Sometimes it lives in subtle choices. Choosing kindness, choosing patience, choosing rest, choosing to keep going. You connect this to gratitude from section 8. Noticing small positive moments can strengthen hope. A warm drink, a kind word, a peaceful night, a gentle reminder that not everything is heavy. Philosophically, maybe hope is the mind's way of protecting your heart. Even when things feel uncertain, hope whispers, there's still something worth waiting for. You imagine whispering to yourself, it's okay not to have everything figured out. There's still time. That sentence alone can feel like a soft emotional blanket. Another gentle humor moment arises as you realize how hope can feel dramatic at night, like you're planning an entirely new life at 1 a.m., then more reasonable in the morning. Big dreams powered by late-night imagination. You think back to quiet love from section 10. Hope often grows in safe, loving environments, where you feel supported, understood, and free to dream without fear. Another relatable emotional truth appears. Sometimes hope is simply the decision to trust yourself again, even after you've doubted your own abilities. You imagine letting your mind rest on hopeful thoughts, not unrealistic fantasies but gentle possibilities. Maybe things can improve. Maybe you'll find clarity. Maybe you'll feel lighter than you do tonight. You connect this to everyday struggles from section 7. Hope doesn't erase struggles, but it can soften them, making them feel more manageable, less overwhelming, more temporary. Another personal feeling anecdote surfaces. Maybe there was a time when someone encouraged you, told you they believed in you, and that single sentence stayed with you longer than they ever knew. Quiet encouragement can fuel hope for years. There's another gentle humor moment as you remember how sometimes a single motivational quote can make you feel inspired, until you realize it's 3 a.m. and you mostly need sleep. Inspirational thoughts, but let's nap first. You reflect on how hope can feel like emotional breathing room, a pause between worries, a space where you can imagine something better, something softer, something more peaceful. Philosophically, maybe hope isn't about guaranteeing happiness. Maybe it's about allowing yourself to believe that your future can still hold warmth, connection, and meaning. You recall the callback to earlier tonight, the idea that healing, love, and understanding unfold slowly. Hope doesn't rush. It waits patiently, glowing quietly in the background. As this section gently fades, hope remains like a soft lantern in the dark. Not blinding, not overwhelming, just bright enough to remind you that even in quiet nights, something gentle, promising, and peaceful still lies ahead. That quiet glow of hope slowly settles into something even softer, a gentle acceptance of imperfection both in yourself and in others. Instead of trying to be flawless, instead of replaying every mistake, you begin to feel a calmer willingness to say, I'm human and that's enough. There's a relatable emotional truth here. Everyone carries at least one memory they wish they had handled differently. No matter how kind, careful, or thoughtful you try to be, you'll still have moments you'd like to rewrite. And yet, those imperfect moments are part of what makes you real. You might think back to something small you once felt embarrassed about, a sentence you worded awkwardly, a choice that didn't turn out as planned, or a reaction you wish had been gentler. At the time it may have felt like a huge mistake. Now it might feel more like a quiet lesson. You recall a personal feeling anecdote, maybe there was a time when you tried your best but still felt like you disappointed someone, or yourself. You replayed it in your mind, overthinking every detail, wondering how you could have been better. Looking back, you might realize you were doing the best you could with what you knew then. There's gentle humor in noticing how harshly you sometimes judge yourself for things that others barely remember. Your mind keeps a highlight reel of your awkward moments, while everyone else has already moved on. Emotional director's cut, featuring only your bloopers. People still wonder why imperfection feels so uncomfortable. Maybe it's because you're taught to aim for perfection, to succeed, to impress, to get everything right. But perfection can feel exhausting while imperfection feels honest. Here's a soft philosophical reflection. People still wonder why growth often comes from mistakes rather than from flawless success. Maybe it's because imperfection gives you something real to learn from. You think back to overthinking from section 11. So much late-night anxiety can come from replaying perceived flaws, things you wish you'd done better. Accepting imperfection can gently quiet that mental loop. Another relatable truth surfaces. Sometimes you demand more from yourself than you'd ever demand from anyone else. You forgive others easily, yet struggle to extend that same kindness inward. You imagine a quiet scene, you sitting with your past self, the version of you who made mistakes, felt unsure, tried and sometimes failed. Instead of judging them, you offer a soft, understanding smile. Another gentle humor moment appears as you realize how unrealistic your inner standards can be. You expect yourself to be productive, emotionally balanced, socially graceful, and magically confident at all times. A truly ambitious to-do list for a human being. You connect this to the quiet hope from section 13. Accepting imperfection doesn't mean giving up, it means allowing yourself to grow without shame. Hope and imperfection can coexist gently. You recall the feeling of invisibility from section 12. Sometimes you feel unseen not because you're inadequate, but because you're quietly trying, imperfectly, in ways others don't always notice. And that effort still matters. Another personal feeling anecdote comes to mind. Maybe there was a time when someone reassured you after a mistake, telling you it was okay, that you were still valued, that you didn't need to be perfect. That moment might have stayed with you longer than you expected. There's another gentle humor moment as you remember how even tiny mistakes can feel dramatic at night. Like forgetting a word, sending a slightly awkward message, or waving back at someone who wasn't actually waving at you. Tiny chaos, but survivable. Philosophically, maybe imperfection is what allows connection. If everyone were perfect, there would be no vulnerability, no empathy, no shared understanding of struggle. Imperfect people understand imperfect people best. You think back to quiet love from section 10. Real love often isn't about perfection. It's about accepting flaws, offering patience, and staying even when someone isn't at their best. Another relatable emotional truth appears. Sometimes you fear being imperfect because you worry it makes you unlovable. But in reality, imperfection often makes you more relatable, more human, more warmly real. You imagine whispering to yourself, "I'm allowed to learn. I'm allowed to grow. I'm allowed to be imperfect." That sentence can feel like a gentle emotional permission slip. You connect this to healing from section 9. Healing doesn't happen in a straight line. It includes setbacks, doubts, small mistakes, and slow progress, all of which are completely normal. Another gentle humor moment arises as you think about how you sometimes expect yourself to improve overnight, like a phone software update. Unfortunately, emotional growth doesn't come with a progress bar, just patience. You recall everyday struggles from section 7. Many of those struggles involve trying, failing, adjusting, and trying again. Imperfection isn't a failure, it's part of the process. Another personal feeling anecdote surfaces. Maybe there was a goal you didn't reach, a habit you struggled to maintain, or a plan that didn't unfold the way you imagined. At first, it might have felt like proof that you weren't good enough. Over time, it might feel like proof that you kept going anyway. There's another gentle humor moment as you realize how your mind sometimes says, "I'll start when I'm perfect," even though perfection never actually arrives. Progress tends to show up first. Philosophically, maybe accepting imperfection is a form of emotional freedom. When you stop trying to be flawless, you make room for creativity, rest, honesty, and peace. You think back to gratitude from section 8. Even imperfect days can hold small moments worth appreciating. A kind word, a soft memory, a peaceful night like this one. Another relatable truth settles in. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is stop punishing yourself for being human. You imagine releasing the pressure to perform, to impress, to always get everything right. Instead, you allow yourself to exist as you are, learning, growing, occasionally stumbling, always deserving compassion. You connect this back to late-night thoughts from section 11. Accepting imperfection can quiet those mental replays, reminding you that not every mistake needs to become a midnight obsession. Another personal feeling anecdote returns. Maybe there was a time when you laughed at an old mistake that once felt unbearable. That laughter can feel like proof of healing, evidence that time and kindness can soften almost anything. There's another gentle humor moment as you think about how even your attempts to be calm and emotionally mature can sometimes fail, and that's okay too. Imperfect peace is still peace. Philosophically, maybe imperfection is not something to fix but something to embrace. It shows effort. It shows vulnerability. It shows that you're alive and still growing. You recall the quiet hope again, the idea that things can improve slowly. Accepting imperfection allows that improvement to feel gentle instead of pressured. Another relatable emotional truth appears. You don't have to be perfect to deserve rest, love, understanding, or peace. You imagine yourself settling into that realization, letting go of unrealistic expectations, allowing yourself to simply be enough for tonight. As this section slowly fades, imperfection no longer feels like a flaw to hide, but a soft, human quality to accept. Something that connects you to others, supports your growth, and gently reminds you that you don't need to be flawless to be worthy of calm, comfort, and sleep. That gentle acceptance of imperfection now settles into a deeper feeling, a quiet sense of emotional safety and peace, like being wrapped in a soft blanket made of understanding, warmth, and reassurance. You don't feel the need to prove anything tonight. You don't need to solve everything. You're allowed to simply exist. There's a relatable emotional truth here. Everyone longs at some point to feel emotionally safe, to feel like they can rest without being judged, rushed, or misunderstood. Emotional safety isn't about having a perfect life. It's about feeling accepted even with your worries, flaws, and unanswered questions. You might notice how calming it feels when you don't have to perform. No expectations. No pressure to impress. Just a quiet space where you can breathe and be yourself. You recall a personal feeling anecdote. Maybe there was a moment when you felt unexpectedly safe, talking to someone who listened without interrupting, sitting in a place that felt comforting, or experiencing a night where nothing demanded your energy. That moment might have stayed with you longer than you realized. There's gentle humor in recognizing how rare it can feel to truly relax. Your mind sometimes acts like it's on duty 24/7, monitoring your past, your future, and your social interactions like an overqualified security guard. People still wonder why emotional safety feels so healing. Maybe it's because when you feel safe, your heart doesn't have to stay tense. You don't have to brace yourself. You can soften. You think back to hope from section 13, that small lantern glowing in the dark. Emotional safety allows that hope to rest, to glow without fear, to feel steady instead of fragile. Here's a philosophical reflection. People still wonder why peace feels more precious than excitement as time passes. Maybe it's because peace allows you to breathe, to think gently, to exist without emotional strain. You imagine a peaceful scene, you lying comfortably, feeling the slow rhythm of your breathing, noticing the quiet around you. Each breath feels like a reminder that you're safe in this moment. Another relatable truth surfaces. Sometimes peace doesn't come from solving problems, it comes from letting them wait. You don't need to fix everything tonight. Tonight is for rest. You connect this to late-night overthinking from section 11. Instead of replaying worries, you gently allow your mind to slow down. Thoughts become softer, less demanding, more like distant echoes than urgent alarms. Another gentle humor moment appears as you realize how much effort you've spent trying to feel productive, even when you're supposed to be resting. Your brain sometimes treats relaxation like a competitive sport. You think back to invisibility from section 12. Even if you felt unseen at times, emotional safety can remind you that your presence still matters, even when no one is watching, even when no one is applauding. Another personal feeling anecdote comes to mind. Maybe there was a night when you finally allowed yourself to rest after a long, exhausting period. Letting go of expectations, forgiving yourself for unfinished tasks, and simply allowing peace to settle in. There's another gentle humor moment as you remember how your mind can resist rest, insisting on reviewing your entire life story right before bed. Tonight, you gently decline that invitation. Philosophically, maybe peace isn't about eliminating problems. Maybe it's about learning to carry them more gently. You think back to quiet love from section 10. Emotional safety often grows in the presence of gentle love. Love that doesn't pressure you, doesn't rush you, doesn't demand perfection. Another relatable emotional truth appears. Sometimes the most healing thing is simply knowing you don't have to pretend anymore. You imagine whispering to yourself, "It's okay to rest. It's okay to feel calm. It's okay to let go for tonight." Those words feel like permission, soft, kind, and freeing. You connect this to healing from section 9. Healing doesn't always feel dramatic. Sometimes it feels like this, quiet, slow, subtle, and deeply comforting. Another gentle humor moment arises as you think about how emotional growth can feel invisible day to day, but somehow noticeable in hindsight, like realizing you now stress a little less about things that once overwhelmed you. You recall everyday struggles from section 7. Those struggles don't disappear, but emotional safety can make them feel less heavy, less personal, less overwhelming. Another personal feeling anecdote surfaces. Maybe there was a time when you thought you'd never feel calm again, yet here you are, feeling even a small sense of peace. That alone can feel like a quiet victory. There's another gentle humor moment as you realize how sometimes your idea of peace includes snacks, blankets, and avoiding responsibilities until morning. Emotional wellness, but make it cozy. Philosophically, maybe peace isn't something you achieve. Maybe it's something you allow. You think back to gratitude from section 8. Even now, there are small things worth appreciating. The comfort of your bed, the quiet of the night, the simple fact that you've made it through another day. Another relatable truth settles in. You don't have to be perfect, productive, or impressive to deserve rest. You imagine yourself settling deeper into comfort, letting your muscles relax, letting your jaw unclench, letting your thoughts soften. You connect this to imperfection from section 14. You don't need to fix yourself tonight. You don't need to become better before you're allowed to rest. You're enough as you are right now. Another gentle humor moment appears as you think about how your brain sometimes wants to plan your entire future at bedtime. Tonight, the only plan is rest. Philosophically, maybe emotional safety is the foundation for everything else: healing, hope, love, growth, and peace. You recall that quiet emotional thread running through tonight. Loneliness, memories, regrets, hope, healing, imperfection, all slowly settling into calm. Everything you felt is allowed. Nothing needs to be rushed away. Another relatable emotional truth appears. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose rest over worry. You imagine your worries becoming softer, lighter, more distant, like clouds slowly drifting out of view. As this section gently winds down, you rest in a feeling of safety, not because everything is perfect but because you're allowed to pause, to breathe, and to simply exist without pressure.